Namaste and welcome to season 3 of Books and Us, the podcast where we explore new ideas and find inspiration through books. I'm Ranjit Monga.
So the idea was to do this book, starting off from how the different communities that call Sikkim home look at this mountain, what stories they ascribe to it, how it figures into their ideas of identity, mythology, and things like that, and also talk about mountaineering and the other things that have happened in the shadow of this mountain. So the inspiration, of course, was my wondering that why are these stories not more widely accessible to people?
Told, yeah. So, listeners, here we begin season 3, and that is a very landmark event for us. And I'm delighted to begin this season with a journey into a land that has fascinated travelers, scholars, and storytellers for centuries. And I'm talking about Sikkim. Sikkim, as many of you may be knowing, is an enchanting mountain state tucked into the far northeastern corner of India. It is a land where international boundaries meet and histories, cultures, and spiritual traditions intertwine. To guide us through this extraordinary landscape, we have with us an eminent journalist and author, Pema Wangchuk, whose book, Khangchendzonga-Sacred Summit, remains one of the most insightful works on Sikkim's history, culture, and the relationship with its sacred mountain. Pema, welcome to Books and Us.
Oh, thanks, Ranjit. Thanks for having me.
So I hope I pronounced Khangchendzonga properly because I know the nomenclature is very fixed.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Everybody pronounces it a different way. If you hear the monks pronounce it, it sounds completely different. So yeah,
Yeah.
Kanchenjunga is as good as it gets.
Okay,
That's close.
so
Yeah.
Pema is a journalist working in Sikkim since 1994. Currently, he is consulting editor at Summit Times. He has also co edited a book, The Birds Have Lost Their Way, a collection of essays on Sikkim's experience with tidal projects and climate change. My own fascination with Sikkim began during a period when I lived in Gangtok. And Gangtok, as you may be knowing, is surrounded by beautiful mountains and is blessed with a magnificent view of the Kanchenjunga. Actually, normally, a lot of people pronounce it as Kanchenjunga. I hope that is also
Yeah,
fine.
that's good. That's good. That's fine. Oh, we'll get to discussing that as well down the
Yeah.
line.
So Kanchenjunga is the third highest peak in the world, and I don't think many Indians understand or recognize that. It is deeply embedded in the lives, beliefs, and imagination of the people of Sikkim. Through this episode, I hope to share with the world some of the stories, legends, and extraordinary people of this remarkable state. Pema, your book was published in 2004 and has been out of print for some time, as you told me. And
Hmm.
for listeners who may not be familiar with it, could you tell us what Kanchenjunga Sacred Summit is about and what inspired you to write it?
So inspiration is very simple. The mountain is like
Mhm.
you step out anywhere in Sikkim. You were here for a
Yeah.
couple of years. You step out anywhere, you see the mountain, right? There's no escaping it. So the mountain continue was always an inspiration in itself. Um, the book, I was very lucky. I keep telling people like how lucky we were that no one else had done this book before us because these stories were always there. We just got the chance to kind of collect all these stories and share it with the readers. The idea for it, so I'll begin with some background, right? I'm not
Mhm.
from Sikkim myself.
Mhm.
So I've worked here. Like I've
Okay.
worked here since 92. That provided me the benefit of kind of looking at things with more wonder, right? When you're
Mhm.
here. And so in the 90s, in the mid 90s, when I was a journalist, just beginning as a reporter, cub reporter in Sikkim, was also the time when Sikkim had just emerged from a, not to get too much into the political history, but it was a
Mhm.
time of kind of a communal divide had been attempted and things like that were there. which is also around the time when a group of people were reviving this festival in a more secular fashion, this festival dedicated to Khangchendzonga called
Mm.
Panglapso. So
Mm.
that kind of was my entry into it, right? So when
Okay.
that festival was being organized, I was doing these stories. People were telling me their ideas of the mountain and of the
Mm.
celebration. So that kind of got me in. And very early, I realized that you are a journalist yourself,
Mm.
that if we do not pick up a passion project on the side, the daily
Grind.
job, the daily
Yeah.
grind can be very
Exhausting.
soul
Yeah.
killing, exhausting,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I kind of was lucky that this just landed on my lap and I started
Mm.
on the side researching, collecting stories. One thing led to the other. The people were
Mm.
very free with sharing their stories with me.
Mm.
And like I said, we were lucky that no one else had done this before. So
Mm.
the idea was to do this book,
Mm.
starting off from how the different communities that call Sikkim home look at this mountain, what stories they ascribe to it, how it figures into their ideas of identity, mythology, and things like that. And also talk about mountaineering and the other things that have happened in the shadow of this mountain. So Sacred Summit, Kanchenjunga Sacred Summit is basically just a collection of these different things that the mountain has come to meet.
Mm.
So, and like the inspiration, of course, was my wondering that why are these stories not more widely accessible to people?
Told. Yeah. Yeah.
The religious people look at it from purely religious, and we know how theosophical discussions happen, right? They
Mm.
kind of are so
Mm.
dense.
Mm.
So my idea was more to kind of share it with a wider, in a more general, approachable way. It's
Mm.
interesting what you also, when you were introducing the mountain. So
Mm.
everybody talks about Kanchenjunga as the third highest mountain, which it is, of course,
Mm.
the third highest mountain. And
Mm.
what very few people even know automatically is that it is the highest mountain of India,
Mm.
right?
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it becomes the highest mountain of India only in 75 when Sikkim merges with India,
Mm.
because the mountain is completely inside Sikkim. It shares a border with Nepal, of course, but
Mm.
like it's not like a part of it is in West Bengal. You
Yeah.
can see it from Darjeeling, but it is completely in Sikkim. So it is the
Mm.
highest mountain of India.
Mm.
It becomes the highest mountain of India only in 1975. And this is the kind of things that, I mean, of course, not completely addressed in that book, but these are the stories that
Yeah.
you want to share more widely, right? Basically, just been very lucky to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the fact that it is on our currency,
Yeah.
Kanchenjunga. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It not anymore, though,
Not
unfortunately.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So it used to be on the 100 rupee note.
Hmm.
And I think, and so that is like in a future iteration of the book. So this was introduced, I think, in 1977, just
Hmm.
after Sikkim became a part of India.
Part of India. Yeah. So when I began reading the book, I actually expected a historical account of Sikkim and its communities, and I was ready for a deep dive into history. But I mean, after a few chapters, everything changed, and the whole new world opened up for me. And I have also been a history student, and but the kind of things you described about the expeditions and how Kanchenjunga became known in the Western world in the 19th century. So that opened up a whole new world for me, and there are so many interesting stories from there. But before we come to those expeditions and how it opened up to the West, can we talk about the communities like the indigenous communities, Lepchas, Limbus, Bhutias, and then the Nepalis, who have shaped the cultural landscape of Sikkim?
I mean, we know this, right?
Yeah.
Given the many cultures, beliefs that we have in our country,
Mm.
a mountain as dramatic, as huge, and in your face, right? This is the
Mm.
only 8,000er that is
Mm.
so close to such a huge so many urban settlements, right? There
Mm.
is no other 8,000er that like
Mm.
is so accessible.
Mm.
So even through prehistory, it would have been like
Yeah.
anybody's guess that everybody who lived in its shadows had some special stories
Aha.
attached with the mountain. So understandably, then, like the Lepchas,
Mm,
the Limbus,
mm,
and let's go with these two
mm,
who are arguably the autochthons, as they are called, right?
mm,
People
mm,
who've been here in the shadow of Kanchenjunga since at
mm,
least prehistory, right? Since the
mm,
Neolithic time, Stone Age at least,
mm, mm,
because all their stories of origin,
mm,
in some way or the other, link back to the mountain.
mm,
So for the Lepchas, it is Kongchen Konglo, the big stone, literally, or the first creation.
mm,
They believe that the mountain was the first creation by their mother goddess. So hence
mm,
it also becomes the eldest brother, right?
mm,
And all the qualities that you would ascribe to an elder brother are attached with the mountain then, right? As a
mm,
protector, defender, benevolent. Same with the Limbus as well, right? Limbus have a slightly different story of origin, but even for them, the snows of Kanchenjunga range uh, become an important part of their origin stories, and not just the origin of life, but also knowledge. Like with the Limbus, it becomes slightly more, some more stories they attach to it, like language, script, awareness, enlightenment. All of these also flow from the range. So when we talk about the Bhutias, for instance, of course they would have been living here since earlier times, but they consolidate the current geography of Sikkim into a kingdom for the first time in the mid 17th century. And it is in the process of consolidation of this land when the people have to be brought together, and Buddhism. So they're also bringing Buddhism to Sikkim, right? Establishing Buddhism into Sikkim. So invoking Dzonga as a guardian deity, which is a very effective tool to kind of ease the adoption of Buddhism for the other communities, to convert them to Buddhism, since their God is also a part of the pantheon of gods that Buddhism has. So it plays that role. So the Bhutias invoke it as a guardian deity, continuing with all the qualities that the other communities had with it.
mm,
And with that, they consolidate a kingdom. I mean, we know through history that in later, like by the time of the third king, when they are facing attacks from Bhutan at that time, and shortly after from the house of Gorkha from across Nepal, the mountain deity, Zonga, who lives there on the mountain, and as far as the Buddhist iconography and belief system is concerned, he also is invoked as a general, and the people are brought in as soldiers, right? So you are the soldiers of your god. So the ideas of defending a land and a way of life. So all of these, to invoke all of these, which must have been, I mean, you got to keep in mind that in the late 17th century, early 18th century, these ideas, the
mm,
kingdom is very young. So these ideas of you being a soldier defending a kingdom
mm,
or a belief system or a way of life would have been so alien. Today they come naturally to us, right?
mm,
The
mm,
ideas of territory, patriotism, and all that. But I mean, in 17th, 18th century, these are like very uh, really alien concepts.
mm,
And to ease their adoption and to bring keep the people together and across different communities, I think that is again
mm,
how it gets invoked in later stages, and it continues with all other communities, right?
mm,
Who, as and when they arrive, they
mm.
look at this mountain and you can't help but be awestruck by it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you look to it.
Mm,
Everyone ends up looking towards it. I mean, even in popular culture,
mm.
I mean, Satyajit Ray makes a movie called
Yes.
Kanchenjunga
Kanchenjunga.
before the merger, by the way, right?
Mm,
When India can only look at it, it does not
mm,
own it yet.
mm,
So that movie is based in Darjeeling and
mm.
invokes another very interesting aspect. I mean, I'm jumping timelines here,
Yeah, yeah.
but in
No,
that
no
movie,
problems.
but
Yeah.
in that movie, which of course we can argue about its class and other issues that it might represent in that movie, but one quality of Kanchenjunga, the another quality that the Lepchas have always ascribed to the mountain is as a witness god, right? So
mm,
whenever you do something important, whenever you like marriages, or in Sikkim's
mm,
case, the Blood Brotherhood,
mm,
you invoke the mountain
mm,
as a witness, right? To bear
mm,
witness to what we are doing. So in that movie, Satyajit Ray, whether he intended that way or not,
mm,
it's called Khangchendzonga. The mountain is just there in the background. It does not play any role.
mm,
It's not a character as in like with dialogues or anything, right?
mm,
It's just there in the background, and it's invoked the call as a witness, as a silent witness, to record the goings on of this one family.
yeah, and
So
also,
yeah,
yeah, and also you had mentioned in the book that what it brings out is also in that film, and also then it is related to Kanchenjunga and how it relates to people, or how people relate to it is how people relate to heights.
yeah.
When we see a tall structure in front of us, what does it invoke? And I guess from time immemorial, it that has been going on. It has invoked so many things in
Mm.
these communities.
Yes, yes. I mean, even today, right? If I'm
Mm.
standing out across Eiffel Tower or Burj Khalifa, I'll take out my phone and take a selfie, right?
Yeah.
So, so it's impossible to think that anyone of significance, any civilization or community
Mm.
that has been around for any
Mm.
significant amount of time in these parts would not have looked at this mountain and said, okay, I
Mm.
need to attach something special to this
Mm.
and link it back to me. So
Mm.
that has always been a
Yeah.
thing with Kanchenjunga. And like I keep saying, like this is the most accessible 8,000er, right? There's
Mm.
no other mountain
Mm.
of this height that is so close, like that you can take a jeep
Mm.
from Siliguri in the plains, and I mean you can see it from Siliguri as well. That's a different matter, but you could just
Mm.
come up and like it's right across
Mm.
sunrise, full moons, everything.
Yeah, and
So
I found that in Gangtok, everybody's life is governed by, or they keep talking. Did we see Kanchenjunga today or not? You know, if it is
yeah,
misty or if it's cloudy or it's been
yes,
raining, and
yes,
suddenly in the evening it will burst forth for catching the last rays of the sun. You know,
yes. I
sometimes
mean,
it's ethereal.
it's through the time, since the time that travel writing has been around in these parts, and we're
Mm,
talking Mark Twain and even earlier
mm,
Hooker and these guys, right?
mm,
This has been like this has almost become a cliche, a trope,
mm,
that it is the most accessible, it is the closest, but
mm.
there is still no guarantee that you'll get to see it,
Yes.
right? That like you've got to earn some merit to be able to
Mm.
meditate on the mountain, so to speak. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and like of course, like every season offers you a different experience of it.
Okay, so you were mentioning the Treaty of Blood Brotherhood and
Yeah.
how Sikkim consolidated as a state or a nation state, as a kingdom. So what exactly went on there? How did that happen? And also, I was very curious to know that everybody talks about this part of the history of Sikkim, but there are the written records were actually passed on orally, and you have written in your book that there's something called History of Sikkim, which was commissioned by one of the kings, the Chogyals, and then but it was never published, and that is the source of all the information. Is that what it is?
Not necessarily.
Mhm.
uh, okay, that book is there, right? And now it's published.
Acha.
um, it
Okay.
has got this really expensive, well produced book has come out,
Mm,
uh, the the history of Sikkim. So
mm,
this was commissioned in I think 1908 or thereabouts,
mm,
by the then king of Sikkim,
mm,
Thudab Nangvyal, and his wife
mm,
Hishe Doma, and so and that was translated by Kazi Dawa Samdop, who's famous for having helped the translation of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
mm, mm, mm,
And so he did the translation, the draft, the first draft of the translation, but it never got published
Mm-hmm.
uh, for whatever reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Until a few years, a couple of years back, the Queen Mother of Bhutan, who is of Sikkimese ancestry, she commissioned the publication of that book, brought in Tibetan language, Sikkimese history, Tibetan history scholars who sat together and did let's say a revision, edited version of that history. It's a huge, very brilliantly produced book published by Ser India, I think. Insanely expensive. I can't afford it right now. So, but that's just one. That's just one record. Sikkim's history has traditionally, like the modern, let's say, post mid 17th century history, has been recorded in its monasteries
Okay.
uh, and in the court documents and things like that.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
this the I mean, and of course, any like a lot. I mean, what is history? I mean, a lot of history is wrapped in myth and
Mm-hmm.
re-remembering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Blood Brotherhood is something that is believed to have happened in the 14th century, actually,
Mm-hmm.
uh, when when a Tibetan chief from the neighboring valleys who has like has has got married, and it's been a few years, has not got a child yet, hears about this Lepcha, very powerful Lepcha wizard, he's called in the history books, but a Bongthing,
Mm-hmm.
who has the power of giving the boon of a son, a child.
Mm-hmm.
So they come across into Sikkim in this story. They come across into Sikkim looking for this Bongthing. It's a long story. They meet,
Mm-hmm.
receive his blessings, they go back, a child is born, a son is born, and after a few years, they come back in a thank you gesture to
Mm-hmm.
thank the Bongthing for the blessing. And the story that Sikkim tells itself is that Thekong Tek, the
Mm-hmm.
Bongthing, when he picks up this child, this babe toddler, and lifts him up like we play with kids in the air like that, the child's toe touches his forehead, which he, being a powerful Bongthing, sees as a sign that this tribe, this group of people will one day come to rule Sikkim.
Okay.
So when he senses that, he says, okay, now a good gesture of thanks would be that if you took an oath of brotherhood with the Lepchas,
Mm-hmm.
the Rongkup, as they call themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
they organize this big, elaborate ceremony in which the Bhutia chief and Thekongtek, the Lepcha Bongthing and chief, they sit together and they take the oath of blood brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
It is near Gangtok, that place where they did
Yeah.
the ceremony, and they invoke again Kanchenjunga as a witness to bear witness, right,
Mm-hmm.
to this ceremony that we will henceforth be brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and also erect stones, which is a very Neolithic ceremony in a way, right? They put up these
Mm-hmm.
five stones to mark
Yeah, it's
that,
a practice.
yeah,
Yes.
they mark to mark that event,
Mm-hmm.
and that is an idea that continues to this day,
Uh-huh.
where Bhutias and Lepchas are mentioned in one breath, right? Bhutia Lepcha, BL.
Mm-hmm.
And so when in the 90s, mid 90s, when I was talking about the revival of the festival and things like that, they were invoking all these emotions, right? Of brotherhood,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
harmony and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes back, that ceremony and the invoking of the mountain between two communities. I think that is one of the earlier um,
Mm-hmm.
recorded in common memory that
Yeah.
Sikkim carries. Yeah.
And
So a
also,
lot of this is, so this is there in the script, in the books maintained in the monasteries, and in the documents maintained in the palace archives and things like that.
okay. And then it opened the way for the actual coronation of the first Chogyal
Yeah,
in
which
the.
is 3 centuries later, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is yeah, about 2.5 centuries later, 4, 5 generations later.
And I mean, even the spots where these events happened,
Yeah,
the ceremonies happened, and the coronation happened in
yeah,
Yuksum. I've been there, and
yeah.
they invoke so much of reverence for people who come there and visit
Yes.
them. Yeah.
Yes, I mean that's that by the time the coronation happens, it's the mid 17th century and it's the other end of Sikkim. I mean,
Yeah.
because if you look at it, the Blood Brotherhood happens right, let's say, near the border with Tibet, whereas the coronation takes place near the border with Nepal.
Mm.
So it's like the eastern end, and then the coronation happens a few centuries later on the western end
Mm.
of
Mm.
the horseshoe that we know as Sikkim
Mm.
now. So it also
Mm.
marks territory in that sense
Mm. Oh, okay.
and carries memories, right, of a
Yes. Yeah.
sacred geography, if you want to see it
Yeah.
that way.
And then the first capital came up there
Yeah.
in
For a
Yuksum.
very brief while.
Yeah.
For a very brief while, Yuksum was a capital for a very brief while. Then they shifted
Mm.
to what is now
Mm.
Gazing, right?
Mhm.
Which is not very far, but
Mhm.
across a valley.
Mm.
So the center of Sikkim's power in the early days of the kingdom was what is now West Sikkim,
Mm.
right? And then they move east after the Gorkha invasion, right? 1790s or thereabouts.
So another thing which has impacted the whole ecosystem of Sikkim is the placement of the mountain and a unique ecosystem it forms. It's at the southern end of the Himalayas, so near the Bay of Bengal, and directly it takes on the monsoon winds. And creates an area which has a unique biodiversity.
Yeah, yeah, completely.
And
Like it is a feat of
yeah,
geography,
because the
yes.
kind of weather systems which arise out of that. So, what are those like?
I mean, there will be better experts who understand these things,
Mm,
but if you look at even the way the Himalayas they kind of arc down
mm,
from the Hindu Kush right to Arunachal and beyond as they peter out, right? This, like you also pointed out, given the way our subcontinent is shaped,
mm,
this is the closest that the high Himalaya gets to this
mm,
huge water body of the any kind, right? So it's the Bay
mm,
of Bengal here.
mm, mm,
And Khangchendzonga, in a way, dips down like not by much, but substantially dips down from the Himalayas, the what we see as the high Himalayas, right?
mm, mm,
So you'll have the bigger mountains with K2 at one end or
mm,
Everest. They are on this chain with Kanchenjunga, which dips slightly down
mm,
south,
mm,
which takes it even closer to the Bay of Bengal in a way. But
mm,
what it also ends up doing is it creates this horseshoe,
mm,
inverted horseshoe that is Sikkim,
mm,
right? So you have the Singalila range on which the Kangchenjunga is there, and
mm,
then you have the Chola range, which is where we have the Nathula. And so this creates this
mm,
horseshoe,
mm,
and we have this constant kind of joke in Sikkim of how uh, even if there is a cyclone approaching Orissa,
mm,
the weather in Sikkim gets affected.
mm,
Not be happening in any other mountain area,
mm,
right? But it
mm,
is because of this weird way that the geography has shaped up. It's also
mm,
in the Eastern Himalayas. Like if
mm,
you travel, you're in Delhi, so when you're
mm,
traveling up to Himachal,
mm,
you do the entire, you can see the progression. You're in the Aravallis in a way, right?
mm,
But as you're
mm,
going to Chandigarh and move on towards
mm,
Shimla, you see
mm.
the Shivaliks, right?
Yes.
Then you have the mid hills, and then you have the high Himalayas, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
you can actually see the steps
mm,
like roll out slowly, and you
mm,
come from Siliguri to like which is the plains.
mm,
You come to from Siliguri to Sikkim,
mm.
th- this whole concept of the
Gradual. Yeah.
mountains, they all get jumbled up, right?
Yeah, you straight
Visually, they
into
get
the
jumbled
hills,
up,
straight into
right? There
high
is no
hills.
rolling business, right? There is no
Yeah,
chota pahad, bada pahad. Everything is just thrown in. And if
yeah.
you think, I mean, this is what we see, right? And I don't know about you, but I'm not a geologist. This is what we've noticed. And that has also resulted in this really crazy biodiversity. It's just 7,000 square kilometers, Sikkim surface area. and but you'll have all kinds of weather systems, all kind of bio, aqua, flora. So that is something that has been created because of the way the mountains have shaped up here, and Sikkim is the happier for it in a way, more blessed.
and also so much fertile. And that was one of the reasons the Tibetans, they discovered uh, or they came to this place, which was a promised land with a lot of fertile land in it.
Yes, I mean that's one way of looking at it. I mean the politics, um, in a very pragmatic and secular way, if you look at what
Mm,
brings Buddhism and the Bhutias and the Tibetans to Sikkim, is actually the politics that is playing out in Tibet.
mm,
So one of the ideas behind a hidden land. So when people talk about hidden lands in Buddhist cosmology, so these are lands that have been hidden, locked away, really, right? Which is an interesting sci-fi concept as well, right? It's like a different portal that will open at the right time in a way, right? As far as the religion is concerned. So when you look at this concept of hidden lands by Guru Padmasambhava, Guru
mm,
Rinpoche,
mm,
is they have been locked and hidden
mm,
until your faith requires these to be unlocked for your
mm,
beliefs to survive.
mm,
So when
mm.
they come under threat, you open a hidden land, and that is where you can go with your
Aha.
religion,
Okay.
right? So what happens in Tibet at that time, when the kingdom of Sikkim is formed, is that there is this strife between the different sects of Tibetan Buddhism, and the Gelugpas, which are the yellow hat Dalai Lama's sect. They gain control of Tibet, which means the Nyingmas, which is the sect that Sikkim follows, they have to find another place where they can practice their religion without pressure or influence or whatever it is that happens, right? When you lose when you lose your strongholds. So that is when Sikkim is unlocked. So they come here with the Nyingma stream of Tibetan Buddhism. So, and of course, then they attribute things like is the hidden land of, so Denzong, as it is called in Tibetan, Sikkim is called Denzong, means the valley of rice. Uh, I have met people who know the language and these ideas who say that the correct translation of this would be the land of plenty. So Sikkim is introduced as this bountiful land where everything does well, right? Because the Tibetans are not rice eaters or rice growers, really. So invoking this land as a valley of rice is kind of should give you pause. So it is the land of plenty, anyways, and rice does very well here eventually.
Books and us opens doors to knowledge and an understanding of the world around us. Let's discover together.
So your book describes how the Kanchenjunga first came to the attention of the Western world
Yeah.
uh, during the Great Trigonometrical Survey of India in the 19th century. So that's something really interesting, and how the Westerners approached it, and how they discovered. And for a couple of decades, Kanchenjunga was thought to be the highest peak in the world.
Yes. Yes. It's an so the Great Trigonometrical Survey was this. I mean, we all know, right? It's this fascinating project undertaken by the British,
Mm,
and so the Great Arc,
mm,
and that is one of the points that I've raised quite often as well. That
mhm.
we probably need to look at whatever survives by way of records of even the first empire of India, right? Which
Okay.
is right in Sikkim's neighborhood. Like
Uh-huh.
Ashok is
Huh.
uh, fighting in Orissa. His capital is in like
Mm, mm,
Bihar. And when the trigonometrical survey is coming up, they spot and measure Kanchenjunga for the first time from
mm,
and a place in the edge of North Bengal. right?
Mhm.
Still in the plains. So
Mhm.
if they could see it then in the 1840s
Yes.
from this forested area in the plains of Bengal, definitely all the other civilizations, the very first empire of India had also seen Kanchenjunga, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
how is it that it is like maybe we are not reading those
Mm.
like records with
Mm.
this awareness in mind to find
They looked
how
upon.
Sikkim, how this
Yeah.
area was seen, right? It would not
Yeah.
have been Sikkim, but how
Yeah.
this region was seen or what this land was about.
Mm.
So the Great Trigonometrical Survey also like spots Kanchenjunga, measures it. Until then, they're
Mm.
thinking that Nanda Devi is the tallest mountain in the world, right?
Mm.
Because that has been measured, right? It is right there from where it all starts. Like they are familiar with the mountains of Garhwal, and they thought that Nanda Devi was the tallest mountain until they measured Kanchenjunga.
Mm.
Although on official records, it holds that position for some time, but unofficially, people who knew this whole process and the mountain heights that were being calculated, within a month of measuring Kanchenjunga, or maybe
Mm.
2 months of measuring Kanchenjunga,
Mm.
uh, they had also figured out Mount Everest.
Mm.
Because from North Bengal, the Great Trigonometrical Survey would have reached Darjeeling, and they did a lot of measuring in Phalot and Sandakpur and these areas.
Mm.
They had spotted and measured Mount Everest,
Mm.
but they were just not being able to confirm the readings. But in the inner circles, they knew that, okay, Kanchenjunga might not be the tallest. We have probably discovered the other one as well. So, I mean, why I point that out is because 1847 is when they discovered that Kanchenjunga is this tall. They did not even know at that time that mountains could cross, anything on earth could cross 5 miles, could rise 5 miles into the air. Uh, by the time they calculate this and confirm this finding, um, for example, Hooker is already in Sikkim, right, in the 50s, late 1840s, 50s, by which time they've already measured Mount Everest as well, but not made it official. So Hooker's book does not really refer to Khangchendzonga as the tallest mountain with any certainty because he is aware that Everest has also been measured, even if not officially disclosed. I don't know why I digress there, but this is what the trigonometrical survey did, right? It figured out mountains and how tall these, and that just triggered this whole um, fascination with
Mm.
climbing, with cartography, with the pundits who are also born out of the similar project when they want to go further across the Himalayas. So yeah, like that was very fascinating. I mean, I was always fascinated by the Great Trigonometrical Survey, but when I was working on this book, I said, "Oh man, wow!" Like, sure enough, there were so many fascinating discoveries for
Yeah.
these people along the way.
And probably that's why you have described it in great, I won't say detail, but with a lot of sense on it and how the data used to be sent to a place in Dehradun, and it took
Yeah,
months to go through the data and come up with the actual figures of the mountains. So I just want to mention here that the Great Trigonometrical Survey was they started from Madras, and they
yeah,
were measuring and drawing geographical maps of the entire subcontinent up to the Himalayas. Isn't it so?
yeah, yeah. Breaking all of India into small triangles.
Acha.
I mean, that's how it works, right?
Mhm.
The
Trigonometry.
trigonometry
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So,
So,
which also makes, I mean, before until like these spy, or not GPS and all that came in,
mm,
India would arguably be the most scientifically mapped territory.
mm,
Uh, because at such a scale, I don't think anywhere else they did this.
mm,
Like where the entire subcontinent was like
mm, mm.
charted out.
And
No.
also, as you mentioned, that the British had other motives also, because Central Asia, the Himalayas, Central Asia, was all unmapped, and all the great powers were trying to establish their areas of influence. British were looking for trade routes to Tibet and get inroads into that area. So this was also one of the reasons, as you mentioned, and because of this, uh, the British sent early explorers, or Westerners came by themselves to be part of this great exploring. So Dalton Hooker and Douglas Freshfield were two of the earliest ones, which I learned from your book, and it was fascinating to read about them. So, what
Yeah.
more? What can you tell us about them?
I mean, Hooker, Joseph Dalton Hooker is fascinating, right? And he's what, the 1840s is when he comes around these areas. That, and he's a close friend of Darwin. Why I point out the Darwin connection is also because that is when like real inquiry into the natural world is happening in the West. And Hooker arrives here, and his book, Himalayan Journals, is such a detailed and fascinating study of not just the flora and fauna that he sees here, but also the people, their beliefs. He has a very sensitive way of looking at things and the people and their beliefs, right? I mean, he's a product of his times, but for someone in the 1840s to have this level of sensitivity and awareness was really fascinating. Like if you and to compare it, I mean, and 50 years later is when Douglas Freshfield comes here, right? Who is a good explorer, let's say, right? He is the president of the Royal Geographical Society and all that later.
Mm,
But by the time, oh, maybe, I mean, I've never looked at it this way. So in the 1840s, you could also keep in mind that the mutiny has not yet happened when Hooker is in Darjeeling, right?
mm, mm,
Um, so after I think 1857, the British way of looking at the natives, so to speak, has also changed, right? Earlier,
mm,
there was this fascination, respect, you're inquisitive. Whereas by the time in 1899, Douglas Freshfield comes around, you have acquired this whole colonial superiority complex probably. So
mm,
Hooker does this entire book sensitive. They are like, even in his footnotes, there are gems, right? People are finding information and interesting crumbs to follow, even in his footnotes and sentences that are just like a throwaway comment.
mm,
To give you an example, um, he just mentions in his book that there is a kind of date palm kind of tree
mm,
which is found deep in the forests of Sikkim.
mm,
It is quite common in the plains, it seems, but it's there in the deep forests of Sikkim as well,
mm,
which the Lepchas
mm,
uh, seek out and cook
mm.
in a very complicated way in
Mm.
times of famine,
Okay.
right? And
Mm,
so this brilliant filmmaker, activist, hunger, like anti-dam activist, Dawa Lepcha, brilliant filmmaker. So he
mhm,
just saw that one reference, right? It's just a
mm,
reference. It's not like a major comment
mhm,
either. Hooker just puts it there and he says, okay, let me find this. And he went around and he's made a
mm,
brilliant documentary on it where he
mm,
finds someone
mm.
who still knows what this
Oh.
tree is, Pushen, I think it's called. And he's made an entire documentary of going with this person deep into the forest, finding it. This person also remembers how to kind of, because it's a complicated thing, right? It's a desperation food, really. It's neither tasty nor easy to convert into food, the pulp of this tree. But that's the exact role, right? It's got nutrients that can help them survive desperate times. So he's done, and so that is Hooker's contribution, right? These two volumes are packed with information like this and very sensitively handled. Whereas you read Round Kanchenjunga, which is Freshfield's book of this circuit of the mountain that he did in 1899, and it reeks of this superiority complex where he's looking down on his guides, on people who've done, the Pandit Rinzing Namgyal, who's done this circuit before him. And
Mm,
Freshfield just does not give him credit because then he would not be the first person to do it, right? The circuit.
yeah. Yeah.
And and his book, if you so when you read Hooker's book, it's accessible, right? You get it.
Mm,
Like
mm,
it's like he's writing for you and me as well.
Mm.
Freshfield's book comes across as it's so obviously written for a European Western reader because
Mm.
he's describing the mountains in comparison to the Alps that they're familiar with.
Mm.
So when you and I read it, at least when I read it, I said like this, I don't know the mountains that he's comparing these mountains
Oh,
to, right?
okay.
Or
Yeah,
the
exactly.
geographical features. And
Yeah.
his attitude is like so problematic. Freshfield does round Kanchenjunga
Mm.
counterclockwise,
Acha.
right? Whereas in the Buddhist belief system, you walk around holy places
Mm.
clockwise.
Clockwise, yeah.
So, which is, yeah, which is what Rinzing Namgyal had,
Mm.
the Pandit, who
Mm.
was a guide for Freshfield and gets
Mm.
no credit in the entire book, which is
Mm.
what Rinzing Namgyal had done a few years earlier,
Mm.
solo, right? He had
Mm.
done the circuit clockwise, had a terrible time, right? Like lost friends and almost died himself. And Freshfield did it counterclockwise, which for the longest time was just no one even notices. But then the first edition of Round Kanchenjunga could not even leave the press, because just as the book was printed and ready to be dispatched, the warehouse caught fire and the entire first edition was burnt.
Oh.
So, like, so the joke would be that, of
Mm.
course, man, like you should have done it right if you had done it clockwise and paid more respect.
Ah,
But
okay.
that's just an aside. I'm like, that is
Yeah.
not how, I don't really
Yeah.
believe that is how things
Mm.
played out, but that is true. Like it all got burned down. So, but to his
Mm.
credit, Freshfield is also the guy why Khangchendzonga retained its name and a spelling which, unfortunately, the Indian official spellings, I don't even know whether we have these official spellings at a national level, which they've not done. So there was this big debate over how Kanchenjunga should be spelt, right? Because the locals would say Khangchendzonga-Sacred and like these really difficult pronunciations. So Freshfield is the guy who was, when he was the president of the Royal Geographical Society, he said we will spell it Kang, right? Uh, and Chen Junga, Jaungha or Ga. He included the G, and that is the international spelling of Kanchenjunga that has been accepted. So the Royal Geographical Society and all mountaineering records will have Kanchenjunga spelled Kang. Sikkim has its own spelling, so let's keep that aside. So that's one good thing that Freshfield. I mean, and Freshfield also fought for uh, Everest not being called Everest for a while, but then gave up that fight.
Mm. And
But yeah, people
yeah.
like him got the G into the international spelling and
Mm.
yeah, worked for Sikkim. It's the, I mean, out of the top three, this is the only mountain with its own name still, right?
Mm.
This is Kanchenjunga is the only one which has its own name continuing to this day. Out of the
Yeah.
top three, Everest, K2,
Mm.
they are all adopted
Mm. Adopted
Namkaran.
names. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Freshfield was also the person who actually did a survey of all the possible routes to climb the mountain, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because he did the circuit, right? So he saw
Mm.
the mountain from all sides. The
Mm.
first Westerner, so the first Westerner with a brilliant photographer accompanying him. So
Mm.
Vittorio Sella,
Yeah,
this
Italian.
brilliant
Yeah.
Italian photographer,
Yeah.
accompanied Freshfield, right?
Mm.
And had already become an expert
Mm.
be- of of like mountain photography and snow shooting in snow and things like that in the Alps. So
Mm.
he accompanied him. So Freshfield had some theories on
Mm.
how the mountain could be climbed, but
Mm.
it is Vittorio Sella's photographs, which was so
Mm.
perfect
Mm.
and wonderful that future, even till 1955, even in 77, in fact, right, when
Mm.
when the Indian army climbed from North Sikkim, or in 1955 earlier, Charles Evans, that expedition, they were still using Vittoria Sella's photographs to
Mm.
kind of look at the way the snow and the crevices played out to mark
Mm.
the possible routes. So yeah, so Freshfield, yes, because he had mountaineering experience and
Mm,
understood geography.
mm,
And but more than that, it is what records Sella came back with. So
mm. Yeah, I looked up some of the photographs on the internet. There's a whole
yeah,
website on him,
yeah, yeah.
and they photographed it from quite close, actually, isn't it?
So
Yeah.
some of the passes, I mean, yeah, I mean, they were at Goshala, they were at
Mm,
Zongri,
mm,
at all the pass, Kangla,
mm,
at not sure the name, Johnsongla. So
mm,
all these passes that are like Yalungkang, the glaciers on the other side. So
mm,
they were like, and climbing quite high as well, right?
mm,
So
mm,
even though they didn't attempt the mountain itself, they did
mm,
climb some of the minor mountains on the sides. And
mm.
yeah, man, how they managed it is crazy because,
I believe he did that during autumn time,
yeah, it,
very close to winter.
yeah, they got caught in blizzards as well
Yeah.
a couple of times.
Yeah. So before we move to the expeditions, can we talk about the Pandits? Because I found some of the really interesting persons from history, were these Pandits or the spies, as they were called,
Yeah.
who were sent to Tibet to get information and do mapping.
Yes, they refined this whole using local people as informers and spies in Uttarakhand itself, right? That is where the Pandit force, so to speak, was the idea was explored and refined. So famous ones in India are like
Sarat Chandra
Narayan.
Das.
No, these are from the Sikkim side, right? Those who did here. I'm talking
Acha,
about the
acha,
eastern,
from
those
the
areas. So
okay,
Nayan Singh and things like that.
okay, okay.
So it was like refined there.
Hmm.
Uh, from Sikkim, what the British, I think, realized, what the East India Company really, I mean, before the British, what they
Hmm.
realized quite early is that
Hmm.
sending mapping from Western India, right, Uttarakhand or Himachal,
Hmm.
if mapping that part of like entering from there and mapping Tibet was a very limited benefit because those lands are largely empty, right? So the Tibet that you cross into from Himachal or from Uttarakhand, there are no big cities or habitations there. The entire Tibetan population is more to the southeast. So they very soon realized that if we want to map and know more about Tibet, it has to be the Tibet that is above Nepal and Sikkim. So, which is why these people were increasingly being sent. Their primary job, of course, I mean, we've read about the pundits, right? Their primary job was to map, like come back with cartographic evidence. And it's so fascinating that the blanks on the map, which the British had not yet marked out, used to
Hmm.
be called Where There Be Dragons. So most of Tibet
Hmm.
on the in the early East India Company and British maps are
Hmm.
marked as Where There Be Dragons because we don't know what else is there,
Acha.
right? We don't know where the places are. And
Hmm.
so Sarachandra Das and Ugen Gyatso,
Hmm.
these two would be, at least in the Eastern Himalayas,
Hmm.
rarities because they were also very well educated in their own disciplines, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Sarachandra Das was teaching at a school. Ugen Gyatso was already a monk, so he had some level of understanding. And
Hmm.
whereas Kintup,
Hmm.
who is another explorer who probably has the most fascinating story of them all, uh,
Hmm.
is actually just someone who's neither very well educated or well connected. Ugen Gyatso is almost aristocracy in a way, right? He's like from some of the more important families of Sikkim. So Ugen Gyatso and Kintup become, it's possible for them to go in disguise
Hmm.
and become pretend to be Tibetans or pilgrims because they know
Hmm.
the language and things like that.
Hmm.
Sarachandra Das becomes even a bigger adventure and challenge because disguise is a very limited option for him, right? He cannot really blend in. So he has to use a lot of contacts to keep him in hiding and things like that. And that does play out in pretty bad ways later for some of the people who hid him, right?
Acha.
So, but when he goes in with slightly more refined ambitions. Like he's writing about history, he's collecting details about history, religion, coming back with scriptures. So it's at a whole different level that his spying, so to speak, into Tibet is. Whereas Ugyen Gyatso and Kintup are more on the field bit, right? So it's more about mapping routes, mapping places, filling the blanks in this big empty of Tibet. Kintup was sent specifically with the task of figuring out whether the Sangpo and the Brahmaputra are the same river or not. Ugyen Gyatso also similarly very cartographic errands. Sarachandra Das goes in with a much more, like he's more driven himself. I'm sure the British would not be very excited about sending him in because like it's difficult, right, to keep him in hiding. But it's more his own initiative and his keenness or interest to know more about Tibet and the way of life and things like that. So he spends a lot of his time in monasteries and he's already learned Tibetan and things like that by then. So that's the, but yeah, what fascinating people like, because every
Yeah.
day is fraught with risks, right?
Yeah.
Going into a place like Kintup, the officer who sends Kintup into Tibet with these logs that he's supposed to throw into the Sangpo at a particular spot, and there will be people downstream in Assam watching the Brahmaputra, and if those logs come down, then they know it's the same river. It is such a weird plot, right? Like, and Kintup goes in, the person who's taking him in sells him into slavery, and he still finishes his job only to come back and realize that the officer who had sent him in died shortly after. So there
Yeah,
was no
because
one watching the river
yeah,
for his.
because he's 3 years too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've already figured out, right? By the
Yeah.
time he kind of gets out, pays off his
Mm.
master and gets out of slavery and comes back to India,
Mm.
it has already been solved, that mystery. So it's many years later
Mm.
that some British officials find Kintup again
Mm.
and record his story, and then they nominate him for some awards and things like that.
Mm.
But Kintup, like, okay, there is also this, there was this for the longest time belief that Kintup kind of people forgot who he was and all that, which is not completely true because some of these early Britishers who were very keen, like people like Campbell and Waddell, these people who are scholars, explorers. Waddell, for instance, hires Kintup, who in the explorer circles people know about him. He hires him as his head guide for a couple of months exploration into Sikkim, and writes about it, and even has a sketch of a young Kintup in his book. So yeah, but what fascinating lives these people lived, yeah, Bapre. And
I think there's a separate book on Sarachandra Das also.
yeah, Sarachandra Das wrote his book as well, no?
Acha, acha. Okay.
Sarachandra Das, I mean, like that. So he becomes the only Pandit who had education, who had awareness, who had the language. So he wrote about his adventures. He wrote a book about his adventures. And like tons of notes that are now accessible in the archives that he left behind. So, and of course, people have written books
Yeah.
about them as well, right?
Yeah.
So Rinzing Namgyal was also one. He's a Pandit as well. But you see, by the time after they finish mapping out Tibet and like there is no longer any empty spots there, right? There are no where they be dragon locations in Tibet anymore. They start using the Pandits as for the trigonometrical survey, for socioeconomic surveys, and like because the British were obsessed with data collection, right? So they had this like trained group of people with just the right amount of scientific skills to help collect data and map areas. So Rinzing Namgyal spends many years in Assam helping with the survey there, the British with the survey there as well.
Rinzing Namgyal also set up Mangan, isn't it? Which is the
Yeah,
headquarters of the North District.
yeah, which is now the headquarter town. He's from the Maling Kazi family, right? So they are the Mangan Kazis, the landlords of that area. Uh, so when the young husband expedition is going into Tibet, which is in 1904, right? Rizning Namgyal was in 1899 took when he took Freshfield around Kanchenjunga, and after that worked in Assam and things like that. By then, and he's from the aristocracy as well. So when the young husband mission to Tibet, when they come to go to Tibet via Sikkim, uh, the f- the first attempt they make to go to Tibet is from North Sikkim because that was the traditional route to Tibet. So they go from North Sikkim. So Rinzing Namgyal sets up Mangan town as a supply depot on the way to keep the young husband army, so to speak, supplied. So it becomes like a way station depot, that kind of stuff, and later becomes Mangan town, which is now a district headquarter. Yeah.
Yeah, and the gateway to such beautiful places, Lachain
Yes.
and
Yes. Or you get all your
Lachung.
passes to North Sikkim made there.
Yeah,
Still to this day. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And there is this spot outside Mangan where there is this spot where Dalton Hooker is supposed to have sat and looked at the Kanchenjunga
Yeah.
because I think he was not allowed into Zongu, which is the Lepcha
Mm.
territory.
Yeah. So yes, so there are two spots there. When Hooker comes to North Sikkim, Mangan is not there at that time as a town. There is a small monastery. The palace used to be at this place called Pudong, which is just outside Gangtok, some distance between Gangtok and Mangan. So from
Tumlong,
Pudong,
Tumlong.
yeah, Pudong,
Yeah,
that is where like Tumlong, the
yeah.
palace area, but
Mm,
now the town is Pudong. So
mm,
from there you climb up on the ridge, and along the ridge you walk.
mm.
So so you could take that route. Otherwise, from Mangan, if you climb straight up to the top of the Mangan hill, so to speak, is a place that the people call Summer Take. So there used to be a British dak bungalow there, which is where Hooker stayed and camped. And slightly ahead of, and then you come down to this place called Singik, which is now there is some guest houses and it's a proper settlement
Yes,
now.
yes, I
Yeah, so
visited Sinking, and
yeah, so
that
Singik,
also has some fascinating spots.
yeah, so Singik is where the forest dark bungalow is there now. So from there, Hooker claims is one of the prettier views of Kanchenjunga, and you have the entire valley, Rongyongchu, like in the Zongu into Zongu, the main valley. You can see it, and at the end of it, at the head of it is Khangchendzonga. So Summer Take and Singik, yeah, that's Hooker, and then he carries on into Naga, Chungthang, further up. And Zongu at that time, when Hooker is visiting, and until much later, was the queen's dowry in a way, right? So the king, when he like those were difficult times, right? Sikkim was going through invasions and things like that in the 18th century. So the king had given Zongu as dowry to his wife. So whatever was collected from there went to her, which is how this area, the idea of a reserve also came about, right? So only the queen had control over that territory. And Rinzing Namgyal, for instance, was the landlord responsible for collecting the revenue from Zongu and giving to the queen.
Mhm.
So yeah, the circles keep
Mm.
turning 60
And
years.
Dalton Hooker seems had a special relationship with Lepchas, and there is a fresco of him also.
Yes.
Uh, uh, People collecting plants for him, and he's sitting in the middle,
Yeah.
and and there's a picture of that in your book, a fascinating
Yes. Yes.
sketch.
It's an engraving. Yes. From the sketches that he made on location.
Yeah.
So Hooker, in his book, as well as in his other writings, constantly mentioned the lectures as being, and which is a very good observation in a way, which is also true to the Limbus, for the Limbus as well. So Lepchas are hunter-gatherers, which would mean that they recognize everything in the forest, right? I mean, that is the generational knowledge that you carry. So Hooker uses, like, they become his main um, resource people because they identify everything for him. They tell him the local names, they tell them where it grows, where you can find it, and like so he uses them extensively to assist him in his research on the flora and fauna of this area, and wrote so much about their expertise as just people with a whole lot of natural awareness that future later British expeditions into Borneo and Africa and Southeast Asia used lepchas as part of their exploration teams to those areas to help
Oh,
with collections and things like that.
yeah. And you have written that he discovered so many new species of plants that he used to discover an average of 10 plants per mountain or peak which he surveyed. And
Yeah,
also
so
the rhododendrons, he
yeah,
discovered many new varieties.
yeah. So like earlier also when we were talking is like it's like Darwin and Hooker are contemporaries and very close friends, and they are the first generation of real naturalists, or I mean, I could be wrong here, but like from whatever I understand, they were really the first to actually start this as a science in lands that were not their own neighborhoods, right? So, of course, these new species were all alien to the Western audience, right? So, and the Kew Gardens in England and the British fascination with rhododendrons is all thanks to Hooker.
Mm.
Like if you go to any of the big parks
Mm.
in London to this day,
Mm.
there is always a corner where they have rhododendrons,
Yeah.
and it's all from like Hooker, who was just so fascinated with this
Mm.
whole range of
Mm.
rhododendrons. I mean, that's just one, right? Apart from everything else that he was
Yeah.
finding and like
Mm.
fascinating. So the
Mm.
discovery, like, yeah, and he covered a huge area,
Mm.
right? Most of eastern Nepal and almost all of present day Sikkim he
Mm.
um,
Mm.
studied. And then
Mm.
Assam as well, right? It's not just
Mm.
here, he went on to
Mm.
Assam as well. So,
Mm.
yeah. And these were all happening for the first time, anyways, for the kind of
Yeah.
audience that he was addressing. So,
And this fascinating story about how he got arrested because Sikkim was actually not open to these people, and then he was kept at Tumlong,
yeah.
the capital
Yeah.
of the Chogyals, and then the political officer Campbell was also
Yeah.
in custody,
Superintendent. He was the superintendent of Darjeeling. Yeah.
superintendent, and they used to exchange messages in a teacup or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so the reason for the arrest was that they had specific orders not to go into Tibet
Mhm.
because Britishers were not like Tibet was very clear with Sikkim that uh, you want the Westerners to traipse around your kingdom, fine, but don't send them into Tibet.
Mm.
And borders were not as clearly delineated, I think, as
Mm.
they are nowadays. So, and of course, it's Hooker, right? Look, he would kind of just say, okay, let me just push my luck and go a bit further. So they were taken into custody when because I mean, the official reason was they ventured into Tibet even though they had clear orders not to, and were kept in house arrest. So Hooker was treated well. Campbell was very badly treated. Like he was actually ill treated, the superintendent of Darjeeling. So Hooker was treated quite well. He was allowed to continue his studies, meet people, write, take his notes, and like you pointed out, exchange chits with each other. And yeah, that led that arrest. They were eventually released. also led to punitive action later, right? The British sent in two expeditions into Sikkim to exact revenge and save face. Also, when they said, okay, now we're going to keep that, this it is leading from this that Darjeeling, with till then they had on lease and would pay a rent to Sikkim. They
Mm,
said, okay, now we'll just occupy it and keep it, and that's how it
mm,
stayed for some years.
mm. Okay, so now I think we have a lot to cover on the expeditions. Would you like to do it on another day for another episode?
Sure, yeah, बहुत लंबा हो जाएगा ना, नहीं तो एक ही
हाँ,
बार
वो
में.
एक ही फिर
Whatever
बहुत
works for
लंबा
you,
था।
actually. Sure, we can do part two,
Mm.
but then you'll have to probably wait till I get back. So maybe
Yeah,
next
yeah,
this weekend or
yeah.
something. Yeah?
With your support, it would be very interesting, and I want people to really know about Sikkim and all the special stories.
Yeah, anything that works for you, man.
Okay. So I'll say we can say goodbye now, and thank
Sure.
you so much for being so candid and being so patient and replying so patiently to all my questions.
No, no, not at all, not at all. This was fun.
And so we'll connect again and record the second part, maybe in say 2 3 weeks.
Cool, cool. Anything,
Okay,
anything
so
that works.
okay, so thanks a lot.
Chalo, man. Ciao.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Well, listeners, that was Pema Wangchuk talking about his book Khangchendzonga-Sacred Summit. Hope you liked listening to the episode as much as I liked bringing it to you. Though it took more than a year to make it possible, I hope it was worth it for you all. For me, certainly it was worth it, and I look forward to recording the second part, in which we are going to discuss the many expeditions which tried to climb this summit. The Kanchenjunga summit has been described as one of the most dangerous and technically difficult to climb in the world. In fact, members of the Everest expedition, which conquered the highest peak in the world in 1953, also endorsed this view. It was finally an expedition led by Sir Charles Evans, who was the deputy leader of the Everest expedition, which finally climbed the Kanchenjunga as well. And as they promised, they did not set foot on the exact summit. They had made this promise keeping in mind the religious sentiments of the people of Sikkim. So tune in for the next episode also to know the entire story. These and many other fascinating aspects are there in Pema's book, and I learned about them also from the book itself. So that's all for today, the first episode of season 3. Let us know what you think about this episode, or if you want to share anything or have a question about our beautiful Sikkim. Write to us at podcast@raymondproductions.org. That is podcast at ramonproductions.org. If you would like to read about the podcast interviews, you can visit the website www.globalbihari.com and search for the column Literary Speaking. Thank you for listening. This is Ranjit Monga signing off. Till next time, goodbye and take care.